Hi folks, Mr. Ackerman here. Thanks for watching. In today's video, we're going to look at how to use Adobe Photoshop Express, which you can see here in the upper right corner of the screen. Before we do that, you need to download it. So I'm on an iPhone, so I'm going to go to the App Store. I'm going to search for photo. Maybe I can spell. There we go. Photoshop Express. And you're going to see that it's a free download. I already have it, so I'm just going to click open, and if you already have it, then you can go into that as well. Here's what you're going to find when you open it and allow it to access your photos from your photo collection. You're going to see a gear wheel at the top, so I want you to click that and check your settings first of all. Now, in terms of sign in, you see I'm signed in using an email address that I use for a subscription to Photoshop from my regular business, my photography business, that is. So I have access to some features that you might not have access to. You can create a regular account, like a Gmail account, let's say, but don't use your gaps. That seems to create trouble. For some reason, it won't let you get in. So create a Gmail account if you don't have one and log in, and you'll have most of the things that I'm going to talk about today. What you need to concentrate on is preferences, and I want you to make sure the following is set up. Under Save as Copy, make sure that's turned on. We want to make sure that we don't overwrite the original photo when we're editing. We always want to save separate copies so we never destroy the original. Another thing to keep in mind is JPEG quality should be set to maximum. It's going to take up a little bit more space on your phone. However, by doing this, you'll always have the best quality images, and you can always resize them downward later if you want. By default, they set it at 85% very high. I think for the little bit extra space, just go to maximum. Okay? Anyway, back here into the main window, under Edit, you're going to pick a photo that you want to edit. And for me, I was doing a little bit of shooting this morning with my class, and we were doing selfies, so I did a selfie in front of the school. I'm going to click on it, it's going to open, and the first thing you're going to see is the looks, which are basically presets where you can change the look of an image. You can click on Basic, and it gives you all sorts of different things you can do. And if I'm being completely candid with you here, I think these days there's so much that's already offered to you as a preset. You pretty much just need to push a button, get the look that you want, and voila, instant art, right? Well, part of this course is developing your personal vision as an artist. So I would encourage you not to check or click on the presets and actually do the editing yourself. First of all, it's a lot more fun. And secondly, it shows that you are growing as an artist and developing a vision, which is going to spill over into your shooting. And as a result, I think you're going to improve. So we're going to skip the looks and we're going to go right away to crop. Now, with cropping, as the name suggests, you're going to cut off part of the image, but only if you want to. So decide if you need to change this by pulling down on one side or possibly pulling to the left or right on another side. Whatever you feel you need to do, you can zoom in by sort of the two-finger pinch. I'm pretty happy with the image as it was. Maybe I'll crop a tiny bit, so I'll leave it like that. If you need to rotate, click on that, and now you see that you can go to the left and the right. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise. It's up to you. This doesn't need much of a change. I'm pretty happy with it there. So what I'm going to do next is go to Adjustments at the bottom, and it will keep that crop there. Now, if you ever see this thing on the right side, just tap the little button which seems to have like two squares hovering above each other. That'll put that away. You don't need that right now. So let's look at what the adjustments are. First thing is selection tools. We're going to skip that and we're going to go to light. This is the first thing that you change. Exposure means overall brightness of the image. Everything gets brighter, everything gets darker. I usually check this or change this a little bit, but not too much. I'm just looking in an overall sense, is this thing bright enough? And keep in mind, if your screen is set very bright, everything's going to look a lot brighter than normal. And if you keep your screen setting brightness setting to a lower value to preserve your battery, keep that in mind. So you might want to always edit with the same screen brightness, maybe somewhere in the middle, just so you have consistency. Anyway, I'm happy with the brightness here. I'm going to go to contrast. Look what happens when I move to the right. Brights get brighter, darks get darker. Stuff in the middle tends to pick one way to go and stay there. So you don't get too many midtones when you go to high contrast. On the other hand, if you go to low contrast, now you can see there's a much greater range of grays and midtones. So you decide where you want this to be. As a general rule, I add maybe 10 or 12 or 15 points of contrast, and then I leave it there. Although I don't always do that. I always look to see what I'm doing and make a decision. Highlights refers to the bright areas of the image. Anything bright is about to get affected. Anything dark shouldn't. So look toward the tree there where there's a lot of brightness. If I move to the right, it gets even brighter, but the rest of the photo, like the wall, isn't really changing. So this is a way to start targeting your adjustment. I want to bring down the brightness there because I think it's too bright. It's blown out. That's better. Shadows now is the reverse. Now we're going to target dark shadow regions without touching the bright areas. So if you look at my sweater here or the doorway behind me, you're going to see it getting brighter without the bright area near the tree getting brighter. If I want some detail in there, I might turn this up a bit. Now, whites and blacks I'm going to be candid with you here. I don't know exactly the difference between highlights and shadows. They are somewhat related. I rarely touch the white slider, but I do like to take the black slider a little bit to the left, maybe minus 10 or 15 points. See what it's doing? It's making those shadow regions a little bit richer toned than they were before. And you might argue with me, well, then why did you bring up the shadows in the first place? It's not a bad argument because I'm kind of undoing what I just did with shadows. However, I find that the final result ends up being a little more punchy and interesting to look at when I do a brightening of shadows and then a darkening of the blacks, but you can argue with me if you feel the need to. Anyway, we're done with light. Let's move on to color. We've been talking in class about color and the warmth or coolness of an image. So let's see what happens when you move to the right. This gets warmer, a little more orange. If you go too far, it looks awful. And if you move to the left, it gets cooler, which could be nice if you want to convey a certain mood. But if you go too far, it starts to look like there's something wrong with the photograph. So you can stay around 0 if you're not sure. I know that the wall of this particular building, the school building, has some warmth to it. So I'm going to go up to about here and stop. I'm happy. Tint. If you look at the slider here, you'll see on the right it is magenta and on the left it's green. You will rarely have to change this very much, but if you look at this image, you might say, it's got a little bit of a magenta tint to it, so I'm going to counteract that by going to the green side just a bit. But if you go too far, again, you're overdoing it. So I would be very, very careful with this. Oftentimes I won't even touch it. Maybe this time I'll leave it there. Vibrance and saturation are similar. They take colors and they make them more concentrated. I find vibrance to be a little bit less of a hammer, so to speak, than saturation. So I tend to use it because it's not so severe. If you go too far, this is what happens. Your sky, everything starts to look ridiculous. If you go this way, it starts to lose all of its nice color. So I might go like 10 points, maybe 15 points, somewhere around there, and that's about it. Let's move on to effects. Now I've got something called clarity. Clarity is kind of like contrast. If you go to the right, things get more contrasty, but it's not as heavy-handed as the contrast slider. So I tend to use it a little more freely than contrast. If you go to the right, the left, sorry, then things get almost dreamy and foggy and cloudy. I find that result here a little bit fake, so I rarely go to the left. I quite often find myself going to the right. Dehaze is a nuclear bomb. I don't think you should touch this. Watch what happens. Okay, just leave that thing alone. I don't know what it is. I never use it, so I'm going to leave it there. Fade is something that is new in this app that I've never seen before. As you can guess, if you move it to the right, it fades the image. I'm not quite sure why you would want to do that most of the time, but if you're going for one of the special effects, like some of the presets, I think they use fade a lot, and they try to make a photo look older or vintage or something like that. Grain, we're going to skip. So let's move on to effects. Now look what just happened. With sharpen, it's zoomed in and you can move around to where you want. And then if you move to the right, everything does get sharper, but look, if you move too much to the right, it starts to look like the photo is just fake and very pixely and kind of awful. So a little bit of sharpening, good. Too much, very bad. As far as I know, luminance noise and color noise is not offered on the free version. Same with HSL. I think that is not offered. And as far as I know, split tone is not offered, but we're not even going to touch that anyway. My students tell me that blur is available. This is something you can play around with. I don't want to talk too much about it right now. Vignette is kind of interesting. This darkens the edges if you move to the left, and it brightens them if you move to the right. Now, brightening them is like, I don't know, something that you get in those photos they sell you at Disneyland when you go with your family. I'm going to leave that out. I think this effect died in 1982, but the darkening kind of helps to concentrate the viewer's attention in the center. And if you go too far, though, it looks awful. So be very sparing with that, maybe -5 or 6 or 10 or something like that, and you should be fine. Optics is the last one. Watch what happens when I enable lens corrections. Just a slight change in the middle there. Did you see it? What this is doing is it's basically taking a prescription, almost like an eyeglass prescription, where Adobe knows that for certain camera lenses, there is distortion from reality, and it is correcting them. So they know that this was shot on an iPhone 6S, and they are applying the correction. And you can do that too. It'll give you a little bit less distortion. Anyway, when you're done, what you can do is click on the up arrow button at the top, and you can save this to your camera roll. And if I go to my camera roll now, I can compare the two images. So here we go. The one that I was just working on was this, and the one that it turned into is this. And I hope you can see that it's brighter. It has a lot more detail. I think it's more pleasing to look at in terms of the colors. And overall, I would definitely want this as opposed to that. So I hope you can now see editing does improve the appearance of your images. You use your artistic vision to say what that's going to be, and I look forward to seeing your images in class. All right, thanks for watching and have a nice day. Bye for now.